want to admit to that. Well, welcome everyone to the Association of Summer Villages 63rd Annual Conference and AGM. And thank you to AUMA for sponsoring our annual conference. I'm Mike Pashik, the president of the ASVA, and I'm also a counselor with the Summer Village of Half Moon Bay on beautiful Sylvan Lake, where my family's been lucky enough for 3 generations to own property. I also represent all of the summer villages on the AUMA board of directors, and I'm a firm believer that summer villages are important to Alberta. Before we get started, there are a couple things I'd like to mention. Speakers with us that will include the Honorable Rick McIver, Minister of Music. I'm wondering if Minister McIver is online and you can unmute. Technology is not being our friend today. Sherry, when you do get Minister McIver.
I'm in the process of connecting.
Okay, give me the thumbs up and I'll just get on to some of my other opening comments. And so I'll just finish off some of my opening comments as we wait for Minister McIver. As we continue to deal with COVID and pandemic, our resilience has become directly measurable to our adaptability. Everything we do and how we do it has both been challenged and interrupted through the course of the last 21 months. This is certainly applied to how we interact with the government of Alberta, our neighboring municipalities, and our residents. We continue to be inspired to tackle difficult discussions with the government on behalf of our members. COVID has certainly changed the format for approaching those discussions, and I'm happy to report on behalf of the board of directors that we continued to make headway in 2021. And Sherry, I'm going to see if perhaps you're struggling connecting Minister McIver, that we just moved to our second speaker to try in an effort to stay on track. If you give me the thumbs up. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to make an executive decision here. And Sherry, if you can turn on Doug Griffith's camera and open his microphone. We'll move into that. Hey, Doug, I see you there. Thank goodness we got something working. Next up is Doug Griffiths, our keynote speaker and author of 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. Thank you to St. Anne Natural Gas, or known as Sang Industries, for sponsoring the speaker. We asked Doug to join us today because he knows about the struggles we face as elected officials and councils. He was an MLA for 13 years and served as Minister of Municipal Affairs. We thought it would be a great idea to get his perspective on what it takes to be a viable and sustainable summer village. And so, Doug, do you see what I see on the screen there?
I see Rick is there.
And
ministers take precedence. I go with that. If you want to go back and have him do his presentation, I'm willing.
Yeah. Are you willing to? Well,
thank
you for being able to bounce around with us on that. We'll just make sure Minister McIver's microphone is open. It's currently blocked right now. And thank you for everybody online. We are struggling with technology today, but it will work out for us. And Minister, are you able to unmute yourself? No. Sherry, I think you're going to have to do something in the settings to help Minister McIver. Minister will just give Sherry a second here to see if she can't unmute you.
Oh, we're
Look,
there.
there we are.
We got the happy sign there.
Yeah, that is a great sign. Let me give you, let me do a 20-second intro, Mr. McIver. And so our scheduled first speaker, and it's with great pleasure that I'm able to introduce the Honorable Rick McIver, Minister of Municipal Affairs. Mr. McIver has been an elected official serving Alberta since 2001. He spent 10 years on the City of Calgary Council, and since 2012, he's been an MLA for the Alberta government. And along that period of time, he's had several key cabinet positions, most notably infrastructure, transportation, and now municipal affairs. And so, Minister, the floor is yours, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thanks, Doug Griffiths. It sounds like I'm making you wait, and I apologize for keeping an important guy like you waiting. And let me, first of all, thank the Association of Summer Villages. I've been doing several Zoom meetings a day for 2 years now, and somehow I've done all of that without having a Zoom account. But now I have a Zoom account. So thank you. I appreciate that very much. As the Minister of Municipal Affairs, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this year's Association of Summer Villages Annual General Meeting and Conference. And as you know, Summer Villages are an institution in Alberta, and you are important as stewards of Alberta's lakes and rivers. And of course, being able to visit a summer village is a welcome change from the rush of the big city for those that live there, and for just a break from any other part of Alberta that people live in. It's easy to see why summer villages are places that Albertans go to relax and unwind. And every year, this conference on priorities and challenges facing summer villages. I want to start off by expressing sincere thanks for all the work that you do. It certainly has been a couple of challenging years in a row. But I think the theme that you've chosen for this year's conference, the power of connection, could not be more fitting. It's important to realize that some of the challenges we are facing can be solved in collaboration. And let's face it, if there's one thing that we've missed the last couple of years, it's that personal connection. Looking at somebody through a mask, bumping elbows instead of shaking hands, just isn't the same as really being together. So it's certainly it's great to be together now, and it will be great when we can all be together whenever and wherever we want to in the future. So by working together, we can create a sustainable and prosperous future for our communities in our province. And as we move forward, municipalities play a key role in helping us rebuild our economies and create jobs for Albertans. So our government remains committed to supporting strong local governments and helping elected officials like yourselves to do the best job to keep Alberta municipalities strong and vibrant. So thank you for what you do, for what you will do over the next 4 years. And our government, look forward to working with you. And I wish you a terrific conference. And thank you for your patience waiting for me today.
Well, thank you, Rick. It's always a pleasure to have you come and say hi. For the newly elected officials in the summer villages, it's great to put a face to the name. And I can speak for everyone here that we do look forward to working with you over our next 4 years. And thank you for joining us. I look forward to perhaps bumping elbows with you at the AUMA conference a little bit later in November. So thanks for joining us today. We don't have any time for questions, which is a shame, but
We'll get her done at AUMA. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a bear pit session there. So everybody needs to write down their questions or just grab me by the elbow when I'm having a coffee or wandering around there. So I will look forward to speaking to you.
Well, thank you, Rick. Thanks for joining
Thanks, everybody.
us. Yeah,
Cheers.
See you again. All right, everyone. Doug, and thank you for stepping aside for a second while the minister had some opening remarks. And so I think just with that, why don't you just jump right into your presentation? Looks like you're in your car. I saw on Instagram, you were talking about 35 flights in the last 70 days, or what, if I don't have the numbers right, you're flying every second day or somewhere around North America.
Oh yeah, no, I am. I'm in a car because I'm in Saskatchewan, and I did a presentation this morning. I facilitated a discussion with some municipalities about regional collaboration and cooperation this afternoon, and I'm back in here doing a presentation this evening. So I have been on 35 flights in 62 days in total. And let me tell you, I really did miss traveling, but I don't know that I missed it that much. That's a lot of planes to be on. And I wish it was one plane every other day, but it seems like it's 3 or 4 planes. And then a few days later, 3 or 4 more planes. So, but I do get to travel all around North America working with communities. I've been to Kansas and Idaho and Iowa and Michigan and Ontario and Manitoba. And like I said, I'm in Saskatchewan now. So, and for those of you that aren't quite sure, don't remember, I was a minister of municipal affairs. I served in a few cabinet portfolios for the provincial government, but just for the record, I've been through rehab. I'm fully recovered. I'm not going back. It's all good now. And I deliberately left politics so I could go back to community building, and community building is what got me into politics. I ranched in one town, I taught in another town, and I lived at the one in between. And I was to me, it was so important to make sure that those communities were prosperous and successful, that's what landed me in politics. In case any of you have forgotten the rule of thumb for politics, if you want into politics, just keep talking. And if you want out of politics, just keep talking. It's the best way to get in and to get out. And so I left politics now almost 7 years ago to go back to what I really love doing, and that's community building. And I was thinking, because I only have 20 minutes or so to talk to you guys, and then to answer a few questions. I was trying to think about exactly what it was I would talk about, because I normally talk for well over an hour, and you don't have time for that, or maybe the patience for that either. So I thought about the theme that you guys have, the power of connection. And Minister McIver was completely right when he said that necessity for connection that connects humans together has never been more paramount than it is right now. But I will argue that though the world is changing, this pandemic has accelerated some of those changes and made us more aware of the challenges our communities face and what we're looking for in communities. But the change has been coming for a long time now. For 10 years, I have been arguing that people are looking to live not in subdivisions, but in real, authentic communities. They want to be in neighborhoods. And we've seen evidence with people moving from places like San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York, from Calgary into Strathmore, or from Red Deer into Innisfail, or from Regina into Moose Jaw. They've been moving to places like Boise, Idaho, Des Moines, Indiana, Des Moines, Iowa, 2 places I've been to just in the last couple of weeks. And I've watched how they're changing the design of their community, their core, their housing prospects, everything that they're doing to make their communities more neighborly and more neighborhood focused, community focused. Even communities like Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that focused on appealing to the seniors population that was left, because of course they're a community that is in the Rust Belt. And when the steel industry and the coal industry collapsed, a lot of their young people left. And they didn't deliberately decide to focus on the semi-retiree population. I had to change that. I used to say seniors, but I was speaking in Arizona, and a lady came up to me and said, "I'm 72 years old. I am not a senior." She said, "I am a semi-retiree. I volunteer and I still work part-time because I have things to do. If you want to meet a senior, I'll get my mom. She's 94 and she'll tell you what it's like to be a senior." And then she actually patted me on the butt and walked away with a smile. And I thought, yeah, okay, I get it now. There's still a lot of energy there. And she just finished telling me how they moved to a community in Arizona, right downtown in the core, because they wanted to be where the action was. This notion that these seniors are about to retire or about to die is wrong. They are living their best lives. And so Lancaster is a great example of a community that said, well, let's focus on the population we have. They focused on on grocery deliveries and employed a lot of unemployed or low unemployed high school students to deliver groceries. They focused on golf cart paths, community gardens and markets, social experiences. They were one of the first communities that converted their tennis courts to pickleball courts. And of course, before the pandemic, they were going to have the World Pickleball Championship. You know how the Americans are. They called it the World Championship, only Americans were invited. But now they're going to redo that since it was stopped by the pandemic. And they've experienced incredible growth that came out of that because they focused on the neighborhood feel. Another great example is Zionsville, Indiana, which deliberately focused on community building. That was their marketing design strategy. That was their communication strategy. And they've attracted new populations of people who want to be in authentic communities. And so the pandemic sped it up. But this has been happening for a long time. But the pandemic, we've seen more and more people move out of larger centers and move to smaller communities because they need to be in a neighborhood and a community. Now, my advice all the time to communities is to not use the phrase small town. I mean, even where I am right now, they said, we're from a small town and really proud to be from a small town. Except as those, they're trying to appeal to people from urban centers. When they say small town, it says things are missing. You don't have everything that they have in the city. What you need to start using is phrases like neighborhoods and communities, because it says you have something the city doesn't. You have the one thing that people are craving more than ever, that social interaction, those social spaces to be together, that neighborhood connective feeling. You know, through the pandemic, we all learned that if you were sick, and I had COVID, it was a horrible experience, and I'm still a long hauler, still have lung issues from it. But we learned that Amazon didn't call us to see if we were okay. They sent an email that said, hey, today's a great day to be Friday, do some shopping. And in the big cities, we didn't have people really knock on our doors and check on us either, because it's so easy to be anonymous in cities. But people are not craving anonymity like they did in the last 30 years. They're craving authentic communities to be part of and socialized in. So, you know, that community is core to our connectivity. But I want to talk to you about three things: the community, which is back on the rise and so critical to our success, but also our internet connectivity. And another thing that the pandemic taught us is how important connectivity is. In my book, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, which I'm sure some of you have heard about, the first chapter is water. And the reason why it's water is because my grandpa always used to tell me that it is one of the most important, valuable resources we will ever have. You know, he said one time to me, you can go for 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food, or you die. And so you need to have water. So it's that critical and precious a resource. But now the pandemic demonstrated to us that connectivity, broadband, high-speed internet, is just as critical a resource to the future of our communities as water ever was. It's the foundation for everything that will allow our communities to grow. And I'm very thankful that the federal government declared it an essential service. I do hope continued funding comes to make sure we can provide those services, because through the pandemic, it was disheartening to see students parked in front of a Tim Hortons so they could use the internet, not because their parents wouldn't get it for them, because most parents know the internet is important, but because there was no option to get the internet for them. And now, I mean, we saw the changes to the economy. We were encouraged to shop local during the pandemic, but even when you shop local, many people, because you weren't allowed on Main Street and to go into the businesses, bought online goods locally, but they still bought them online. We learned how valuable online connectivity is for education for our children. We saw new innovations like the new telehealth tool, which I know I heard everyone complain and say, this is horrible, it just sends you to a doctor anyway. But it was the first day, and it's the first time it's been launched, and it will continue to improve to provide new services and new opportunities. In fact, we saw that Warren Buffett started this before the pandemic. in the United States, in the critical and often antagonistic debates about healthcare in communities and about whether or not Obamacare should be supported or rescinded. He was sick and tired of the Democrats and the Republicans fighting about this and playing political, hopscotch with their healthcare. And so he and a few other CEOs got together to explore what it would be like to deliver online services. And with hundreds of thousands of employees among all of those CEOs that got together, they realized that they could set this up online and have doctors available online so that their employees could access a doctor just like this online and do an appointment with a doctor over their coffee break or over their lunch break or in a short amount of time. And they're currently working on, and they're investing in companies that are creating innovative tools that allow for online diagnostics. So I could be here in the car doing a diagnostic test on my skin, and the results would go online to a doctor on a secure channel so that they could see the results. And if the doctor didn't understand them, a specialist could be next. And if the specialist didn't understand it, then you could go see a doctor in person. And this has only been accelerated by the fact that the pandemic shut us down and stopped so many people from going to see the doctor. It's why, I'm a bit of a Green Bay Packers fan, and I've seen the NFL now advertising how many people have not got cancer screening checks in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. And that is one of the primary focuses of this new organization that Warren Buffett and his colleagues have worked on, to make sure that people do have access to healthcare in case there's another pandemic or something else happens, that, remote situations where you can't necessarily see a doctor in your community all the time. So we've seen it change healthcare. We've seen it change shopping and the economy. We've seen it change healthcare. We've even seen it change socialization. I didn't realize that because my two sons, who are 16 and 13, are a little bit of a homebody type. I didn't realize that they could go on Disney or Netflix and they can watch a movie with someone else while they're at home. I still don't understand how it works. I mean, when I was a kid, we used to sit on the phone and talk to each other while we were watching the movie, and my parents would say, "Get off the phone." Somehow they're still doing that, but they're doing that online. And we've seen mental health services delivered to people who are shut-ins, who are locked in. I mean, those services weren't available before the pandemic, but since the pandemic, we're all shut-ins, and we all need some mental health and some coaching. And I can't believe how many people I did not realize were seeing mental health specialists in person, who are now seeing them online and doing their visits online. It expanded the availability of those services to every single corner of the province and the country and the world, as long as we have connectivity. So we've got communities that have grown in stature and importance, and they're critical because they connect us, they connect our souls, they connect our families, they connect our personalities. We need human interaction. We've got connectivity in the form of broadband to make sure that we're connected to the services that we need and still connected to each other. And again, I've seen so many grandparents who didn't get to see their grandkids for so long, but deliberately were able to socialize like this to still make sure they had some of that connection. And the last one, between community, connectivity, like broadband service, the last one is cooperation. And I've been saying for a long time that we have this tendency, maybe particularly as Albertans, the conservative brand, we're independent, we stand alone, to think that to pride ourselves on our individualism and our self-identity. It's ironic that we're also the people that created co-ops in Canada and realized we needed to work together. But at this particular point in time, we seem to have this idea that this rugged individualism and this my rights are paramount to everything else on earth is taking such stature, when we need to cooperate to get through this pandemic. We need to support each other through this pandemic. And so, I mean, I just had a gentleman who said, no one can make me go get a vaccination. And I had to point out to him that no one is making you go get a vaccination. He said, but I want to participate in society. And I said, well, maybe you should participate in society and get vaccinated then, because the reason for a vaccination is to make sure society is successful, not to subjugate your rights. But there is this fear of this individualism, yet our successes always come from cooperation. In businesses, we've seen you know, and maybe it's unique to businesses because entrepreneurialism is about winning and beating your opponent. Yet there are countless examples of where cooperation has worked. Yes, there's competition between businesses, but they also cooperate to be more successful. When I was in PEI, I saw a brochure from the top 3 golf courses in that, and those 3 golf courses are 3 of the world's top 10 golf courses. They're amazing. But I saw a brochure, and this goes back 15 years, where all 3 golf courses were on there. And I asked them why they would do that because I thought they'd be competing more. And the gentleman who I asked said, we only have 135,000 people in PEI. We don't have enough business to keep us all going. So instead of fighting with each other to try and get your neighbor's pie, we decided we would grow the pie. But no one's going to come here for one golf course and one tour. So we market this as like a package to come explore all 3. And now we have people come for a week or 10 days from all over the world to golf. We grew the pie. And that made me look for some other examples. If you've ever been on St. Albert Trail between Edmonton and St. Albert, you will see that there is a chunk of road about half a mile long where there must be a dozen furniture stores. There are a dozen furniture stores because they know if they conglomerate together, yes, they're competing, but if they pile themselves together, everyone will go there when they're looking for a new couch. You can see everybody's couch all at the same time. And so they know they grow the pie instead of fighting with each other over it. And it leads to more business. In fact, one of those furniture stores didn't like that and said there's too much competition here and moved halfway across the city and promptly went broke in 6 months because no one wanted to drive all the way across the city to look at one more couch. And it happens everywhere. It's why in Wetaskiwin, and we all know the slogan, cars cost less in Wetaskiwin, right? It's burned into our brains for the last 35 years. They partnered because they realized if they worked and advocated for more car dealerships, more variety of cars to continue to go, not because they didn't want, if they didn't want the competition, they would have chased them away, but they welcomed them and they actually market themselves together because they know now anyone looking for a car will go to Wetaskiwin. Even if you're from Calgary, you'll stop in Wetaskiwin knowing the Auto Mile is there and it's a good chance to see them all. And then there's more of an odd that you're going to buy a vehicle from there than drive all the way home and buy one because you've met them. And so they grow the pie instead of shrinking it. And there are countless examples of how businesses do that. It's like competition, it's competition, but in a cooperative way. And our municipalities need to learn to do the same thing, desperately so. I mean, I can still remember the example just a couple of years ago of a group of municipalities. There were 7 of them, 6 towns, let's go with that, in a county. And they had a fire service agreement. And they were all excited about the fire service agreement that they had had for so many years. And then just a few years ago, it fell apart. It fell apart because a bunch of egos that were elected officials decided, no, you can't tell my volunteer firefighters what to do. And so someone else said, well, my taxpayers paid for the fire hall. And someone else said, well, my taxpayers paid for the fire truck. And they all took back their stuff and the fire agreement fell apart. And it was that way for a couple of years. And when they asked me if I could help them, I said, sure, let me see what I can do. And it was really easy. Because it turned out that out of 7 municipalities, only 3 of them had people that were qualified and trained with a license to drive the fire truck. Only 2 of them had people that had the certification required to properly operate the fire truck. I mean, these are big devices now with a lot of valves. Only 2 municipalities had people who could operate them. And none of them had anyone that could do rescue operations within any of their municipalities. And so it was easy. I simply looked at them and said, you know what's going to happen? There's going to be a fire and someone's going to die and you're all going to go to jail because you're more worried about who owns the property than about delivering services to your citizens. And they said that's not going to happen. And all I had to do was say Flint, Michigan, because 12 people died from Flint, Michigan, their fight over a water agreement. And the governor got charged last year for his role because, again, egos got in the way instead of making sure the municipality was strong. And the reason why that happens is because municipalities get scared. They're going to lose their autonomy, their power, and their control about the situation, their identity. And I even worked in one municipality. They said, well, they want us to have a collaboration framework on economic development. You know what's happened? We're going to lose our identity. And then the rumors went around on Facebook, which is the great place to find untrue things. And people were saying, yeah, no, I heard they're going to come and take our history books out of the library and they're going to take our town sign down because we're going to lose everything. And that's not the case. And so they refused to actually cooperate. And you know what happened? They took the town sign down and the library closed because they had no growth and there was nothing left to actually keep the lights on. Their fear of losing their identity, their autonomy, and their power led to them losing their identity, their autonomy, and their power. Our cooperation, our collaborative efforts can allow us to actually work on joint marketing strategies, to actually coordinate to create an economic development budget that can attract families and attract new businesses. We're only going to be successful if we cooperate. And so I know my time is already up, but I just want to emphasize to you again that if you're talking about the power of connection, and I'm not just meaning Summer Villages, I mean every municipality in the province and across the country and across North America, because this is not a unique Alberta problem. If you're looking at the power of connection to help bring us together, the connection comes from building stronger communities, making sure we have connection to the internet, so not so they can deliver services to us, but so we can make the world aware of us, and cooperation, so that we pool our resources in a constructive way to continue to grow our communities. And I've said this a million times, I'm going to say it again. If we're going to make sure we have a successful country, and if we're going to make sure we have a prosperous province, our work begins and ends with making sure our communities are successful. Because if our communities are successful, if they're prosperous, they're engaging, then our leadership can achieve wonderful things. Our businesses can be profitable and our families can take care of themselves and each other. I know that all of these issues are incredibly complex. And I know the world continues to change faster and faster and faster, but that simply means we need to focus more on our cooperation, on our connectivity, and building strong communities. It means the urgency is there more paramount now than it's ever been, and it's not going to go away. We need to work together on those 3 C's to make sure we have real authentic connections to keep our communities strong. And that's the only way it's going to work. Ensuring that we have community, connectivity, and cooperation is the way we adapt. And if we refuse those things, if we refuse to adapt, then we die. And our province and our country can't afford to see our communities perish. Our success is dependent on their success. Thank you.
Doug, great words. I appreciate that. The 3 C's from a recovered politician. You still have the passion, though. I can see that. And, we could have had you last year because our theme last year was community. And the focus on the last half of that word in unity. And so I think, Summer Villages do get together. They do connect. They know how to cooperate. Certainly, there's a number of us that share administration and staff. And so we're slowly on that and trying to share that good news with others and how to cooperate with those neighbors and with the government as well.
Mike, can I add? I think the reason why Summer Villages are such a good model of that cooperation is because necessity is the mother of innovation, and you don't have the resources to do it independently. And that's the challenge. Other communities say, no, we can do this fine for now. But since you can't, you've had to innovate, and that's it. That's what's made you guys such tremendous leaders across the province.
Oh yeah, and on our lake, Sylvan Lake, 8 municipalities banded together to create a joint IDP. There is cooperation out there, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's what's needed to be successful. Doug, we don't have time for questions. We're some technical issues and all of those things, but certainly I could see the ASVA having you back and picking your brain just a little bit more and enjoying some of that real passion that you have in helping us and others be successful. So thank you for stopping in today, and I hope to catch up with you again soon.
Sounds good. You reach out anytime. I'm happy to help.
All right.
Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
Doug. Bye now. Well, a great presentation from a great guy. And just to keep us moving along, next up is Angela Duncan, and this segment is sponsored by Fortis Alberta. Angela's been heavily involved in the advocacy work that the AUMA has been doing on policing, and so she's definitely the right person to give us an update on that portfolio. So Sherry, if you're able, let's roll her video. Fantastic. She's muted right now, I think, Sherry. Folks, we're just having a little technical issue. We'll get her speaking right away here. Perhaps it's the volume on your computer.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, if everyone will bear with me, I'm just gonna go out of my controls here.
No problem. If I had a joke, I'd tell it. If I could sing, I'd sing. But I'm not going to do either. We'll just.
Hopefully this works.
Well, I can hear at a very low level.
As a reminder, the size of a municipality determines the municipalities with populations of over 5,000 have 3 choices. They can establish their own municipal service. They can work with other municipalities to establish a regional police service, or they can contract an existing police service.
Just a little more volume on Angela, and it would be good.
Municipalities with a population under 5,000 do not have a choice. Under the Police Act, the government is responsible for services to its municipalities. The province or they can contract an existing service. The most common agreement for these municipalities is contract. Municipalities with a population under 5,000 do not.
Well, you know what? If we're struggling, I've got a note saying that Angela could just do this live for us. We could play the slides, and Angela, you could maybe just voice over them. What do you think about that? Unmute yourself if you can, Angela. Oh, you can't. Okay. Sherry, maybe unmute Angela.
Okay, she should be there.
No, she's not quite.
Oh,
Oh,
there
there we go.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Angela.
I can do this on the fly. I just can't share the slides all at the same time, but I'd be happy to give the verbal presentation.
Okay, we'll start again.
Well,
Yeah,
how about
do you want to try the video again, or do you want me to go ahead and?
How about you keep up with your slides on the video?
Well, I can certainly try. I mean, I don't know how it's going to go. So, okay, well, here we go. Let me just open up my presentation here so that I'm on the right page. And okay, well, I believe you've already introduced me. My name is Angela Duncan, and I'm the interim president of the AUMA. I also happen to previously be the vice president representing Villages and Summer Villages. and I'm on the interim police advisory board. So I've been in the policing game for a little while now. I'm very happy to be here to talk with you guys about how policing affects small communities, especially right now. This is a very hot topic. So the two main topics I want to talk to you about today are police governance, specifically how Summer Villages and other small communities can have a say in setting police priorities, and police resources and service delivery. In other words, now that we're all paying for policing, how are these funds being used? And finally, I'll go over two other important policing issues: the impact of the RCMP collective bargaining process and the proposal to establish an independent Alberta Provincial Police Service. I recognize that some of you have been following along with policing for some time, and for some of you, this is very new. So I'm going to try and keep it pretty high level and maybe room for questions at the end, although we're quite far behind, so potentially not. So I'll start with an overview of police governance. And I do apologize if you guys can hear stuff going on in the background. I wasn't really anticipating speaking live today, so I have the whole family home. As a reminder, and in case you don't know, the size of your municipality determines your options for providing local police services. Municipalities with populations over 5,000 have three choices. They can establish their own municipal police service. They can work with other municipalities to establish a regional service, or they can contract an existing police service. The most common arrangement for these municipalities is to contract the RCMP as their service. Municipalities with populations under 5,000, so all of us, don't have a choice. Under the Police Act, the Government of Alberta is responsible for providing police services to these municipalities. The province meets this obligation by contracting the RCMP as the provincial police service. Prior to 2020, these policing services were provided at no direct cost to the municipality. However, starting last year, the province began billing municipalities with populations under 5,000, including Summer Villages, a portion of their policing costs. Police governance has been a long-standing issue for municipalities of all sizes that are policed by the RCMP. Because the Provincial Police Service Agreement is negotiated between the province and the RCMP, many municipalities that receive policing under this agreement feel like they don't have any influence over how their communities are policed. Even municipalities that contract directly with the RCMP have expressed frustration with inconsistent processes when it comes to setting priorities and reporting on performance. I've often heard that the relationship between a municipality and its detachment almost entirely depends on the detachment commander and their willingness to engage with local government. So when the province introduced the new police funding model last year, AUMA advocated very strongly for a mechanism that would enable municipalities to help establish local police priorities, to hold police services accountable for local service delivery, and to ensure appropriate reporting on performance and outcomes. In other words, no pay without say. The Minister of Alberta Justice and Solicitor General responded by establishing the Alberta Police Advisory Board in early 2020. This board is being implemented in two phases. First, an interim board, and then an operational board. The interim board, which I sit on, started meeting in June of last year, and our term is supposed to be up this November, and we'll have more on that in just a moment. The interim board has two main purposes. First, we're responsible for engaging with municipalities and in sharing the municipal perspective on provincial policing with the RCMP and the Government of Alberta. Second, we've been tasked with determining the scope, structure, and recruitment and selection process for the permanent operational board. According to the terms of reference developed by Justice and Solicitor General, the interim board is made up of 4 representatives from the RMA board, 4 representatives from the AUMA board, and 1 representative from the Alberta Association of Police Governance Executive. The chair of the interim board is Tanya Thorne, the new mayor for the town of Okotoks, and also vice president of towns for the AUMA. The other representatives are Tyler Gandam, mayor of Wetaskiwin, and Trina Jones, a councillor for the town of Legal. Earlier this year, the interim board completed its report on provincial policing priorities for 2021-2022. This report has been accepted by both the province and the RCMP, And we expect to see our recommendations reflected in the latest version of the Justice and Solicitor General RCMP multi-year business plan. You or your municipality should have received a copy of the full report through the AUMA. If not, you can access the report on AUMA's online policing hub. The report contains 8 priorities for policing, along with related recommendations for each priority. The interim board identified these priorities based on the feedback we received from municipalities through a number of channels. Our key instrument for gathering feedback was the survey that we distributed last fall. This survey received 209 responses from 160 different municipalities. We also asked for your feedback, on an RCMP reporting template that was emailed out to everyone. Finally, we had several discussions on policing at RMA and AUMA events. On behalf of the interim board, I would truly like to thank everyone who took the time to share their thoughts with us. While I don't have time in this presentation to go through all of the priorities and recommendations, I encourage you all to take a look and follow up with me if you have any more feedback. The board really relies on your input to make sure that we are accurately reflecting your concerns while fulfilling our role to give municipalities a stronger voice in policing. The interim board also completed its recommendations for implementing an operational Alberta Police Advisory Board. Again, AUMA emailed a copy of this report out and it's posted on the online policing hub. The governance recommendations include the following draft governance documents: a terms of reference, a code of conduct, and a conflict of interest. Like the previous report, the interim board reached out to municipalities to solicit feedback while creating these documents. We sent out a survey earlier this year, and we also gathered feedback at our events. Our vision for the operational board is that it provides all municipalities policed by the RCMP with a collective voice in shaping provincial policing priorities. This means that our recruitment and selection process for permanent board members strives to ensure that community members are diverse and represent a range of municipal types and sizes. I mentioned earlier that the interim board's term will be up at the end of November. Unfortunately, although we submitted our report on governance to the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General back in June, we are still waiting for the minister's feedback. Until we have ministerial approval, we are not able to begin a recruitment and selection process for the permanent board. So the interim board's term may need to be extended beyond November. The last thing I want to mention before moving on to our next topic is that communication is a priority for the interim board. We want to make sure that municipalities know what we are working on, as well as how to contact us and share feedback. We will continue to work with the AUMA to pass along information to Summer Villages, especially about upcoming surveys and other opportunities for you to share input. We will also give you updates on our work at municipal meetings and events like this one, so thank you for the invitation. We are also distributing a quarterly update to municipalities that outlines our work and shares documents and resources that are relevant to policing. You can find all of our updates and reports on the AUMA Policing Hub. And please feel free to email us at any time if you have any questions or thoughts to share. Now we're going to move on to police resources and service delivery. Both AUMA and the interim board know that municipalities who have begun to pay for policing expect and need to see more frontline police resources. I'm pleased to be able to tell you that the RCMP has committed to reporting on how the revenue raised by the new police funding model is being used, both this year and on a go-forward basis. Unfortunately, owing to timelines, the interim board couldn't provide recommendations on the resource rollout this year. However, we've had some preliminary conversations with the RCMP about potential resource strategies for next year, and we see this as an important role that the operational board can play in the future. For the 2020-2021 budget year, the funding gathered through the new police funding model will result in 76 new RCMP members and 57 civilian members. Of the 76 new regular RCMP members, 46 are frontline positions in rural Alberta detachments, and all of these have been filled. 30 of the new regular member positions are centralized positions that provide specialized services to all Albertans, such as callback units, police dog services, child advocacy, and offender management. 24 of the centralized positions have been filled to date. In positions to support regular members and relieve some of their administrative burden. The civilian positions include detachment administrative and support services, community engagement and outreach specialists, call center operators, rural crime reduction analysts, and forensic identification services. Of the 57 civilian positions created, 42 have been filled to date. All of the details of the resource rollout, including the detachments that are receiving additional officers, are covered in the RCMP resource report. The interim board has been including these reports in our quarterly newsletters. And if you haven't seen them, you can find copies on AUMA's online policing hub. The last two things I want to talk about today are the proposal for an independent provincial police service and the potential impacts of the RCMP collective bargaining agreement. One of the recommendations that came out of last summer's Fair Deal panel report was the establishment of an independent provincial police service in Alberta. AUMA and RMA held a joint president summit on policing for all Alberta municipalities in February, where we discussed this issue in depth. We surveyed event attendees, and our survey results indicated a high level of support for retaining the RCMP as Alberta's provincial police service. At the time, AUMA chose to hold off on announcing a policy position related to an independent provincial police service. We were expecting that the province would release the PricewaterhouseCoopers feasibility study as committed to by the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, and we wanted to see the results of this study before taking a position. This study still has not been released, and after attending the minister's town halls this summer, AUMA has become concerned that the province has already decided to proceed with a provincial police service. So in July, AUMA issued a news release reiterating the need to release the PwC report and calling for greater transparency from the province. In response, the Premier stated that an Alberta provincial police service would not cost municipalities any more money. However, it is important to note that Alberta would forfeit federal government funding of about $160 million a year if a provincial police service were formed. There would also be numerous additional expenses related to setting up a new police service, equipment, infrastructure, a police college, and so on. We have been told by Justice and Solicitor General staff that the PwC report is undergoing analysis before being presented to Cabinet this fall. AUMA would still prefer to see the report and cost analysis before officially taking a position on a provincial police service. However, we certainly support our members who have chosen to advocate on this topic themselves, and we will continue to watch this issue closely and keep you informed. Last month, the federal government finalized a collective bargaining agreement with the RCMP union. I'm sure that you've heard about it. This is the first ever agreement negotiated between the feds and an RCMP union, and it comes out of a 2015 Supreme Court decision that upheld the RCMP's right to collective bargaining. The agreement includes 5 years of retroactive pay increases, as shown in the table that I'm hoping is on your screen. Previously, the RCMP had estimated a rate of 2.5% growth on RCMP pay and pensions annually as a result of labor negotiations. However, the actual pay raises outlined in the tentative agreement range from 3.25% to 4% annually and are compounded on top of each other. This means that the salary for a first-class constable will increase by a total of 24% over the 6-year agreement. If the federal government chooses to pass the costs of retroactive pay increases along to its contract partners, this will result in substantial costs for governments that contract the RCMP. For the 47 Alberta municipalities with municipal police service agreements, MPSAs, this retroactive pay will result in a total cost of approximately $60 million. An estimated $80 million in back pay will be owed by the government of Alberta under the provincial police service agreement. Right now, we don't know what this means for municipalities with populations under 5,000 who pay a portion of their police costs through the new funding model. Justice and Solicitor General staff have advised the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General staff have advised that the Minister of Justice continues to support the 5-year police funding model unveiled last year. However, this model is based on a % recovery of provincial policing costs. So if these costs increase, the % recovery billed to municipalities could also increase. Furthermore, when the model expires in 5 years, the province could decide to recover a higher percentage of the costs from municipalities. AUMA's position, and for once, we're in alignment on the province with this, is that any retroactive pay increases that were negotiated by the federal government must be paid by the federal government. Municipalities were not at the negotiating table. We weren't able to plan for cost increases because the federal government did not keep us informed. And we certainly don't have piles of extra cash just lying around. We're working with other Western Canadian municipal associations and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to communicate our position to the federal government. Due to the recent federal election, the federal government has not yet responded to our advocacy, but we will, of course, keep everyone informed and updated as soon as we hear anything new. And that is it for my presentation. If there's time, I'd be happy to take questions, but I understand that there might not be.
You know, I think we're going to have to pass on questions for now. I would suggest to our members, if you have questions on the presentation, please send them to Sherry, our executive director, or directly to myself. And we'll interact with Angela to get them answered. I guess I'll see you next week, is it? For a board meeting with AUMA? I think we're on next
Absolutely,
week.
Mike. And I'll also pop my contact information in the chat if anybody wants to reach out to me personally.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. All right. Well, Angela, thank you for bringing us up to date on the policing. I know for Summer Villages, the download and costs is significant. And, you know, we're all figuring out how to get our say. And those that are interacting with their local RCMP detachment, good for you. Those of you that aren't, I suggest that you make that a priority as you move forward in the next year to make sure your voice is heard and that you are getting the service that you would like to get. Well, Angela, thank you very much. I think we'll just check in with Sherry and see if our next presenter is online and get his slide deck ready.
Just 1 second here.
I don't see Jerry's name in the participant list, but perhaps he's one of those phone numbers.
He was unable to connect, and so I've got him via phone, and he's going to go through.
Well, that's fantastic. Let me just give him the 30-second introduction then, and we'll see if we can get that technology working for us. So next up is Jerry Heckel with Alberta Environment and Parks, and this topic is sponsored by Fortis Alberta. Over the years, Jerry has presented many times to the ASVA on boat mooring regulations. The ASVA and Jerry have been working on the need for this type of regulation since 2014. And we're happy to say that the new regulations were released in April of this year. I'm sure that many of you are still trying to figure out how to best implement them. And hopefully Jerry here can help us understand what the new regulations are trying to achieve and maybe make your jobs just a little bit easier. Jerry, if you're ready to roll through your slides, please jump in.
Will do. Can you hear me, first of all?
I can. Sounds like you're in a tin can somewhere, but We can hear you.
Okay, well, that's good. So thanks so much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be able to speak to you directly again. It's been a few years where that was not possible. Sure, if you can move to the first slide, that would be great.
And Jerry, I would just say that make sure you're talking directly into the telephone. You're kind of fading in and out.
All right, I'll try to make this work as best as possible.
All right, thank you.
All right, so I only have 5 slides because I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity for Q&A. I'm sure
Jerry,
there's lots of questions, and I want an opportunity to be able to interact with you guys directly. So the 5 slides I have are basically to provide an overview of what the disturbance standard does. Most of you probably know already, but what it does is it sets out the maximum acceptable footprint that temporary docks can have on public land. And for most folks, the lake bed is owned by the province, not by adjacent property owners. So that typically requires an authorization to be an occupant of Crown land. And for those seasonal structures that residents put out, technically invoke the requirement that an authorization would be required for those. We didn't require that in the past by policy, but when our regulation was amended and consolidated, that option was removed. So we were looking for a way in which to find an alternative solution to issuing thousands of authorizations in the province. And that's where the mooring disturbance standard comes in. So it in itself creates the general permission. So it is the authorization for a waterfront landowner that if they follow the standards, they don't need to do anything else. That is your permission. So this greatly reduces the number of applications that the department needs to receive, and of course also the work for adjacent landowners, because they don't need to submit an authorization or an application. But I should say it doesn't remove the authorization requirement for all docks. And Sherry, if you can move on to the next slide. I'll get into what those other circumstances are. But first, just as a summary, what is the Common Dock Standard? You can see from the picture here, and that is the same picture as the fact sheet that is available and the infographic that's available for folks to download. The standard is basically based on the average lot size that's out there, and it allows for a waterfront landowner to put out a single dock that can extend out to a line of navigation. And that line is the 1 meter depth contour within a water body. We chose that line because for most boats, that's deep enough to get out to open water. And so you don't need a dock that's longer than that. And we chose a depth because every lake is different. And so if it's shallow, you're going to need a longer dock. And if that depth is reached within the very near shore area, well, then you don't really need a long dock either. So it seemed to be a practical approach to it. The standard does not limit the number of watercraft that can be moored. However, there are practical limitations, right? Because the size of your dock can't be more than 50% of the frontage width. So that's going to have some limitations on the number of boats that can be moored. For folks that have sailboats with, a long keel, we do have the option of allowing that to be moored off of a mooring anchor. And so that's part of the dock standard. And there are some construction standards that are associated with your dock as well, mainly to make sure that the materials being used are not toxic to the aquatic environment. The location of your dock structure does have some rules attached to it because we have a setback requirement from a projected property line. And that is mainly to ensure that the general public, if they have the ability to reach shore, and for others to navigate out the open water if necessary. So that in a nutshell is what the dock standard is. For most people it works, for others it doesn't, but then there is still an opportunity for people to get an authorization if their dock can't meet the standard. Next slide, Sherry. And this relates to aquatic vegetation control. So one of the things that we built into the standard was an allowance for people to remove some aquatic vegetation as it's associated with putting out a dock. There are some limitations attached to that, of course, because these are it is part of the aquatic environment, and a lot of aquatic species do rely on that vegetation for their life cycle processes. So, for example, we have fish species that will only lay their eggs on emergent vegetation stems. So if we remove all that, then we remove that spawning habitat, and that has obvious issues for fish recruitment and maintenance. So there are some rules attached to that. We also built in a provision for the removal of aquatic invasive plants. And that is a growing concern for us in Alberta in our aquatic environments. So what we did basically is we allowed people to remove those largely without restriction, because the goal is to get rid of them when you find them. The key, though, of course, is do you know what you're taking out? And so there are a couple other regulatory requirements, not under the Public Lands Act, but under our Fisheries Act, which requires the individual, before they undertake the removal of aquatic invasives, to contact the department, because there may be methods that are better than what you're intending to use to remove that aquatic invasive plant. And so they all have different life histories and reproduction strategies. So one method may not work for one plant where it might work for another. So that gives us an opportunity to speak with you and to provide you the guidance that you need before you undertake that activity. I should say that we had to take some steps to amend our water ministerial regulation as well to make sure that it was exempted in that regulation as well, so that we didn't put people into regulatory jeopardy. And we are, as a department, considering the development of a code of practice under the Water Act for aquatic vegetation control as well, just to make sure that when it is undertaken, that there are some standards associated with how that work is done. So currently, and these rules haven't changed from what has always existed. You're allowed a single lane that's a 4 meter wide maximum. It has to be, if you're removing aquatic vegetation to put in a dock, it has to occur in the same place every year, and it can only be cut between July 15th and September 15th. Those dates are important because before July 15, we still have birds that are nesting and fish that are spawning. So it's a fairly late window, but that avoids some of the federal regulatory requirements for waterfowl and other international bird species. The removal can only be by mechanical means, however, and it can't be more than 1 meter in depth. So if that's maintained, there shouldn't be a problem for getting boats out into open water. Okay, next slide, Sherry. This slide gets at what mooring activities still require authorization or disposition from the department. So basically, if your dock cannot meet the disturbance standard requirements, then it should be authorized if you're putting it out for more than 14 days. So a seasonal dock that does not meet the standards requires authorization. Multi-user docks and community docks are also require authorization, as well as backlot owners. And this is important because they're not covered in any shape, way, or form in the disturbance standard. The disturbance standard only applies as a general permission to waterfront, semi-waterfront landowners. If more than one dock is something that a resident is interested in, then that additional dock requires an authorization as well. And of course, commercial docks, marinas, things like that will apply for unauthorized. So basically, if it's not for personal recreational use and if it's not for waterfront, that is subject to or disposition depending on what required or restrictions.
Jerry, I hate to interrupt, but if you could speak up a little bit more or stay closer to the telephone. We just started losing you again in this section. So please do what you can to be a little bit louder.
Okay, sorry about that. One more slide and then we can get to our questions. Sherry, this will be the last slide. So there are a few implementation challenges that we've had to date. One of them relates to wildlife sanctuaries. So most of the wildlife sanctuaries that we have are seasonal, but it turns out that lakes like Black Labish are entirely listed as a wildlife sanctuary. So the disturbance standard doesn't apply to that, and all docks in Lac La Biche require an authorization. So that's been a bit of a challenge for us in the region to try to address as those applications come in. So one of the things that we've noted is that we're going to have to look at that in the disturbance standard and maybe in a future amendment reduce that regulatory burden. The other thing that's been of interest to us has been we've had a lot of requests from backlot owners to get access to put a dock out. And I should mention that it's not really the department's role to find mooring spaces for backlot owners. So one of the things we need to do is look at our fact sheet for backlots and remove any implication that there is that a backlot owner is able to find a place to moor. That may not be possible, mainly because if every waterfront person puts out a dock and every semi-waterfront person puts out a dock, then the question arises, well, where is the space for all these backlots only to have docks? And so I'm sure there'll be some questions about that. That'll be my answer. But, this becomes a community issue of, how do we accommodate those backlog users within a summer village? And there are different strategies that can be employed. The other thing we want to do is we realize we do need a fact sheet for municipalities, mainly for the counties, to maybe explain a little bit more around what their role is in dock management, and mainly over what it means to provide a consent. We've been finding that some municipalities view it as an approval, which it is not, because a municipality can't approve a dock on the Crown's land. That is our role. But what the consent is, for municipalities that are waterfront owners themselves, the consent is to allow somebody else to put a dock in front of their land. And so that is how we in the department know that it's okay to issue an authorization for somebody else to put a dock in front of someone else's land. So that's the importance of the consent. We have found some issues around